Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print, the Force is with the readers, and a couple of cartoon series will begin to appear in comic form before they show up on television. I'm your host, Nathan P. Butler. This time we're looking at the first issue of Marvel's newest series in our ongoing breadth and scope of Star Wars publishing here, which is Ewoks. Yes, we're looking at issue number 1 of Ewoks. There on the cover it says, "Tebow, our rainbow bridge is fading. Ope." Right, this is the first issue entitled The Rainbow Bridge. That cover is also used on one of the Ewok annuals, Ewok Annual 1985 in the UK, which reprints this and some other Star Wars materials there. So this is the first US release. Notice there it says Star Comics, but underneath it says Marvel. This is a special imprint of younger reader series from Marvel entitled Star Comics. It's essentially just a division of Marvel. You can find this these days, if you really want to, in the pages of Star Wars Omnibus, Droids, and Ewoks from Dark Horse Comics. It's not part of the A Long Time Ago series, but it is reprinting old Marvel stuff like the A Long Time Ago Omnibus series has been doing. This includes all the issues of Ewoks and Droids from Marvel, from Star Comics / Marvel Comics, and oddly enough, the Star Wars and Ewoks Adventure coloring book from Golden Books. It's an odd addition to have in here, but we'll deal with it when the time comes. Now, to preface this, Nelvana Limited, a Canadian company, was brought in by Lucasfilm to do 2 Star Wars animated series, okay, starting in 1985, September of 1985. One of these was Ewoks, the other was Droids, The Adventures of R2-D2 and C-3PO. Droids would wind up having essentially one season with these storylines that created connected arcs, and then they would finally wind up with a special on television called The Great Heap, but not get a second season. Ewoks got 2 seasons. The first season was mostly individual episode stories, and then the second season wound up being episodes that were sort of split in half, with 2 stories per episode most of the time, and there was a huge shift in the Ewoks series between Season 1 and Season 2. They tried to make it appeal to broader audiences and whatnot, but in doing so, they kind of ripped the soul out of the series, as I'm sort of fond of saying here. For instance, in Season 1, Latara has this crush on Tebow, and she's all kind of like cutesy about Tebow. But in Season 2, that's gone. She's basically a bitch to every other character, and she doesn't have a thing for Tebow, but he had a secret fling for her, a secret flame for her, that she then uses against him at one point to get him to do whatever she wanted him to do. Tebow in Season 1 is basically wise beyond his years. You get to Season 2 and he's a bumbling apprentice of Logray and it's just not working right. Certain characters like Deej, Wicket's father, just disappears moving into Season 2, as does his aunt, I believe it was. We also have the issue, of course, of Wicket's characterization changing. He becomes kind of a smartass in the second season. I just constantly, except for Nisa, pretty much all these characters have their souls ripped out and their patterns of behavior sort of rearranged for Season 2. Probably part of why Season 2 isn't anything that's been released recently on those home video re-releases of some of this stuff. Though we were told, of course, with Celebration 6 that StarWars.com would eventually be streaming all of the Droids and Ewok series, but so far that has not yet come to pass as of this recording in February of 2013. So, those series would begin in September of 1985. And you can find those, which we're not going to cover here on the show in depth, because this is about published materials, not video materials. You can find it a lot of places. There were some early VHS releases of some of the episodes of Ewoks and Droids. This is one of them. This has Cries of the Trees and the Tree of Light from J2 Communications. This is the only one of these that I have, but there are some of those out there. They also produced those animated classics videos, okay? And this is one of them. This is Droids Animated Classics, The Pirates and the Prince, which had several episodes combined, one of the story arcs here. Then they took that, and later on as animated adventures instead of animated classics, you had Droids as a double feature with The Pirates and the Prince and Treasure of the Hidden Planet, another storyline merged together to make essentially a movie out of it. They did the same thing with Ewoks. VHS animated classics here, we had The Haunted Village. And then for Animated Adventures double feature, we got The Haunted Village and Tales from the Indoor Woods. Though Tales from the Indoor Woods really butchers the episodes. All these somewhat do that. There's some editing done, and to make them combine together into feature-length films, with droids, it kind of makes sense because they were meant to be story arcs. With Ewoks, it's an absolute mess some of the time. Watching the original series versus watching the animated adventures double feature is somewhat of a headache, but if you check out the Star Wars Timeline Gold over at StarWarsFanWorks.com/timeline, as I get to the summaries of each of these stories, I note underneath what the differences are between the original versions and these edited together versions. I do the same thing for the Clone Wars Director's Cuts episodes versus the aired episodes, if you're really that curious about it. But in January of 1985, note here, we're talking about 8 months prior to the release on television of the first episode of either of these, here's Marvel with Ewoks as a comic book series. Now, bear in mind, with Marvel Comics, you have that 114-issue main series, right? 107 regular issues, which are still ongoing right now, 3 annuals, which are now done as of 1985, and of course, we also had that 4-issue adaptation of Return of the Jedi. So at this point, Marvel has been just producing that main line going up to issue number 107, and it's moved into that post-Return of the Jedi phase. Now, with Star Comics, they're bringing in a new comic series for the first time. If you consider Return of the Jedi and the annuals to be part of that main series whole, then this is the first time we're getting another Star Wars comic series from Marvel that's not part of some magazine like, say, Pizzazz and such. So this is kind of a big deal, and it's the first to be printed by an imprint other than regular Marvel Comics. It starts out with Ewoks. Eventually we will wind up getting droids, but not quite yet. So, what's up with this first issue? Well, it's kind of a goofy little story. All these stories are kind of goofy little stories, but that's sort of in keeping with what Star Comics was all about and what the cartoons, to a degree, especially with Ewoks, were all about. We wind up starting out in part 1 of the Rainbow Bridge with Teebo, Wicket, and Nisa running along with some berries that they've collected and whatnot. And bear in mind here that, just like you see on the cover, here's Wicket with a yellow hood. Now, of course, in the cartoon series in Season 1, it's a orange hood. In Season 2, it's a green hood. All kinds of different swaps of the color palettes here, but I guess that lets you know which story it's coming from if you happen to just see a still image. Bear in mind here also, we have been told that this is all taking place about 3.5 years after Yavin, so basically 6 months prior to Return of the Jedi. It's this comic book series, then you've got the cartoon series, Season 1 and Season 2, then the telemovies, Caravan of Courage, and the Battle for Endor, and then Return of the Jedi finally happens. It's a very cramped time period on the forest moon of Endor. Just like apparently there's a lot of different species we never see in the films on the forest moon of Endor. So they run along with their berries, and Nisa steps on a poisonous nightshade thorn. It looks like she's going to die. Turns out there is a way to help her. It's sunnydew plants. But sunnydew plants and this nectar, this glowing nectar that can save her, can only be found across the so-called Rainbow Bridge. They got to go across the Gorge of Fire, right? A gorge full of fire. And the only way to actually get across that without, say, hang gliders, which might work, is this thing called the Rainbow Bridge. It's this little crystal, and as long as the sun is shining on it, it creates a bridge across this gorge. The problem is, Gantu the Ogre had been going back and forth across the gorge, coming after the Ewoks, stealing stuff from them, their supplies of honey, mostly. But when Chief Chirpa finally stopped him, he stole some of the nectar, and he wound up stealing the Rainbow Bridge gem, this strange crystal, and ran back across the bridge so that the ogre has been trapped since then. Now, though, that's the only place to wind up finding that nectar, so although Chief Chirpa does not want to allow it, Wicket and Teebo, secretly with the help of Logray, break in, basically. They take the crystal from where it is being guarded by an old Ebab, kind of an old snoozing-on-the-job Ewok there. They take it, they go across the gorge, they wind up meeting sentient rocks, the Xandor Rockers, I kid you not. Wicket winds up placing one flower that they find into his satchel. They get inside, they steal the nectar, the ogre is coming after them, and in the process of this fight, where they're trying to keep the crystal from him, the nectar gets spilled, and winds up, it spills on the ogre, and now he's not afraid of the dark, because he glows, so he doesn't really care about needing the nectar or anything like that anymore, but there's hardly any that is left. By the time they get back, it looks like Nisa's time is over, but some of the nectar got on the flower in his satchel. It sort of mutated or transformed into a sunny dew. They're able to use it to save Nisa. All's well that ends well, and, well, Nisa, you just might say that I found it. That is, the pretty flower at the end of the rainbow. Yeah, you kinda did. Now, bear in mind, these stories are being told in multiple parts. The first part of this is simply called The Rainbow Bridge. Then you get about partway through the story and you get Rainbow Bridge Part 2, A Stone's Throw. One issue of the original series, but done in multiple pieces here. And then Part 3, The End of the Rainbow. Basically, they're all told in 2 to 3 little chunks here, even though it's all meant to be one story, I guess to kind of keep the younger audiences reading and knowing where they are, because it is geared toward younger audiences as a whole. So, this story, this oddball little tale, where the bridge is made of a rainbow from a crystal, and there's the glowing nectar and the magic sunny dew potion, etc., etc. Is this an essential read? Absolutely not. There is nothing about this that makes an essential read, not for Marvel readers, not for Ewoks cartoon viewers, not for overall modern Star Wars fans. It's a goofy little tale, but it's kind of what we are going to find ourselves expecting of this series. Very rarely will there be anything of these that is of a continuity redeeming value, although, I mean, if you're looking for little kids fare, then this definitely works in that regard. And there's not a lot of little kids fare with Star Wars anyway, outside of, film adaptation type books or Clone Wars adaptation type books where they take them and dumb them down for younger audiences. This at least is geared toward them in their original form, with Dave Manak writing, and the penciler is Warren Krimmer. So new faces to Star Wars, not part of the previous Marvel series. So not one I would necessarily hunt down unless you're trying to collect them, like I was when I was hunting these down a few summers ago. But, it's the beginning of a new era of Star Wars with Marvel. Star Comics has now launched Ewoks. Droids is coming soon. With that, we'll wrap up this episode. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with the readers.